The Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for nearly a mile in every direction. Floating platforms held representatives from over 200 species, each one watching the human ambassador with expressions that ranged from boredom to open contempt. Kevin Marsh had stood before this assembly many times in his 30 years of service. He had learned to ignore the whispers and the looks. But today was different. Today, he carried information that could save or doom every civilization in the galaxy. "Honored representatives," Marsh said, his voice carried by translation devices to every corner of the vast chamber. "I come before you with evidence of a threat that demands immediate action. The Vorath Collective has entered our galaxy." The Rithani High Minister, a tall being with silver scales and 4 arms, made a sound that the translator rendered as laughter. "The humans come to us with warnings of monsters from beyond the stars." How dramatic. How very human. Marsh kept his face calm. He had expected this. "High Minister, the Vorath have already consumed 3 civilizations in the outer darkness. Our long-range probes have recorded their harvesting operations. They convert all organic matter into fuel for their expansion. They do not negotiate. They do not stop." "Your probes," said the Pelori ambassador, a small amphibian creature with large golden eyes. "Human technology is still quite primitive compared to our own. Perhaps your sensors made an error." "There was no error," Marsh replied. He activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. Images appeared showing massive machine ships tearing apart planets, harvesting entire populations. "This is what awaits us if we do not act." The assembly fell silent for a moment. Then the whispers began again. "Humans have always been obsessed with war," the Rithani High Minister said. "You come from a death world where everything tries to kill everything else. Your history is nothing but blood and fire. Of course, you see enemies everywhere you look." Marsh felt his hands tighten at his sides. "High Minister, I am trying to save lives, including yours. We have maintained peace in this galaxy for 10,000 years, the High Minister replied. "We did this by rejecting the violent ways of species like yours. The Galactic Council will not be manipulated into war by Deathworlder paranoia." The vote was swift. The Council rejected the human warning by a margin of 187 to 13. Only a handful of smaller species sided with Earth. As Marsh left the chamber, he could hear the Rithani delegates laughing among themselves. 3 light years away, Admiral Claire Bennett stood on the bridge of the USS Horizon and watched the vote results come through. She was 52 years old, with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen more combat than any other officer in the fleet. She had commanded ships during the border wars, had lost friends and crew members to enemies both human and alien. She knew what war looked like, and she knew what was coming. "Admiral," said Captain Nathan Cole, the Horizon's commanding officer, "the Council has rejected Ambassador Marsh's petition." "I saw," Bennett replied. "It changes nothing. Begin fleet mobilization." Quietly. Cole nodded. He was 38, young for a captain, but Bennett had chosen him specifically for this command. He had a gift for tactics that bordered on genius, and more importantly, he understood that sometimes rules had to be bent to save lives. "The Council will call it an act of aggression. Let them. When the Vorath arrive, they will be grateful we prepared." The human fleet began its quiet mobilization. Across Earth's orbital shipyards, workers increased their shifts. Weapons were loaded, engines were tested, and crews were recalled from leave. The official explanation was a training exercise. Everyone knew it was more than that. Ambassador Marsh returned to his quarters on Venner Prime, feeling older than his years. He poured himself a drink and sat by the window, watching the alien ships come and go from the spaceport below. 30 years he had spent trying to build bridges between humanity and the galactic community. 30 years of being called primitive, violent, dangerous. And now, when he finally had something important to say, no one would listen. His communication device buzzed. It was Admiral Bennett. Ambassador, I wanted you to know that we are proceeding with preparations, regardless of the Council's decision. Marsh nodded slowly. They called us paranoid warmongers. They called us worse than that during the first contact negotiations. We survived. This is different, Admiral. If the Varath are as dangerous as our intelligence suggests, the Council's entire fleet will not be enough to stop them. And they have excluded us from their defense planning. Bennett's face was hard on the screen. Then we will be ready to pick up the pieces when their plan fails. Earth will not fall because aliens think we are too primitive to understand the universe. The first Vareth scout ships were detected 6 days later. They appeared at the edge of Pelori space, 3 massive vessels shaped like twisted metal spiders. The Pelori Border Patrol sent a greeting message, following protocols that had maintained peace for millennia. The Varath did not respond with words. They responded with weapons that turned the patrol ships into scattered atoms in seconds. Then they began moving toward the Pelori colonies. And the screaming started. On the bridge of the horizon, Captain Cole watched the distress signals flooding in from across Pelori space. Admiral, he said quietly, it has begun. Bennett closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them, they were cold and determined. Signal the fleet. All ships to battle stations. And get me a channel to the Galactic Council. I want them to see what their peace has brought them. The galaxy was about to learn a terrible lesson. And humanity would be there to pick up the pieces. The colony world of Shalith had been beautiful once. Elder Morvith remembered the crystal lakes and the singing forests, the children playing in the shallow waters at sunset. Now there was only fire and death. The Varath machines moved through the ruins with terrible purpose, collecting organic matter and feeding it into their processing units. Millions of Pelori had lived on Shalith. In 3 hours, none remained. Morvith was one of the few who escaped, cramped into a small shuttle with 40 other survivors. As they fled into space, they watched their world die behind them. The Elder had lived for 200 years. He had never known war. His people had never needed to fight. The Galactic Council protected them. The Great Alliance of Civilizations kept everyone safe. The Council had failed. Across the galaxy, the response to the Varath invasion was swift. The Galactic Council assembled the largest fleet in recorded history. Over 10,000 warships from 100 different species gathered at the Nexus staging point. It was a display of power meant to intimidate any enemy. Admirals who had never fired a shot in anger commanded vessels that had never seen real combat. But the fleet was massive, and the Council was confident. Humanity was not invited to join. They still think this is about politics, Captain Cole said bitterly, watching the fleet assembly from the Horizon's bridge. They still think they can exclude us, and it will not matter. Admiral Bennett stood beside him, her arms crossed over her chest. Let them learn. We will be here when they need us. Lieutenant Commander Donna Price looked up from her tactical station. She was 34 years old, an expert in weapon systems both human and alien. Admiral, I have been studying the Varath combat patterns from the Pelori engagement. Their tactics are simple but effective. They overwhelm with numbers and superior firepower. No strategy, no creativity. Just pure aggression. That is because they are machines, Chief Engineer Victor Lang said from his station. He was a large man with graying hair and hands scarred from decades of working with ship systems. They do not think like living beings. They calculate and execute, which means they can be predicted, Cole said slowly. If we study their patterns, we can find weaknesses. Bennett nodded. Continue your analysis, Lieutenant Commander. I want to know everything about how these things fight. The Council fleet engaged the Varth 3 days later at the edge of the Rithani home system. 10,000 ships against approximately 2,000 Varth vessels. The numbers favored the Council by 5-1. The admirals were confident of victory. The battle lasted 6 hours. Cole had disobeyed orders to observe from a safe distance. The horizon hung at the edge of the combat zone, sensors recording everything. What they witnessed would haunt the crew for the rest of their lives. The Council ships moved in perfect formation, just as they had practiced in their ceremonial exercises. They fired their weapons in coordinated volleys, following tactics that had been developed for parades rather than combat. The Varth did not care about formations or protocols. They simply attacked. The machine ships moved with speed that seemed impossible for their size. They broke through the Council lines and began destroying vessels from within the formation. Council admirals shouted orders that made no sense, trying to maintain their perfect patterns while their ships exploded around them. When ships were damaged, their crews did not know how to fight through the damage. When officers died, no one knew how to take command. The Varth knew only one thing: how to kill. And they were very good at it. By the end of the 6th hour, over 8,000 Council ships had been destroyed. The survivors fled in disorder, their formations shattered, their confidence broken. The Varth did not pursue. They did not need to. They simply resumed their advance toward the core worlds of the galaxy. On the horizon's bridge, there was only silence. 8,000 ships, Price finally said. Millions of crew. Gone in 6 hours. Cole stared at the sensor readings, his face pale. They did not know how to fight. Not really. Their wars were games, ceremonies. They had forgotten what real combat means. They never knew, Bennett said quietly. Humanity learned war through 10,000 years of killing each other. We learned it in blood and fire and pain. These species evolved on gentle worlds with no predators, no competition. They never needed to learn. Lang shook his head slowly. And now they have no time to learn. The Varth will reach the core worlds in weeks. Bennett turned away from the viewport. Her face was hard, but her eyes held something that might have been sadness. Get me a channel to Earth Command. We need to speak with the President. Admiral, Cole said carefully. What are you planning? Bennett looked at him for a long moment before answering. The Council laughed at us. They called us primitive, violent, dangerous. They excluded us from their alliance because they feared what we represent. She paused. Now they are dying because they do not understand what we understand. We know war. We know death. We know how to fight and keep fighting when everything seems lost. You want to help them, Cole said. After everything they said about us, I want to save them, Bennett replied. Because that is what humans do. We save people. Even people who hate us. Even people who fear us. It is who we are. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at her crew. Prepared the ship for high speed transit to Earth. The galaxy is about to learn why they should never have underestimated the Deathworlders. The Rithani High Minister had never knelt before anyone in his 300 years of life. His species considered themselves the leaders of galactic civilization, the wise elders who guided lesser species toward enlightenment. They had looked down on humans as violent, primitives barely worthy of attention. Now he knelt on the floor of the United Earth Parliament, his silver scales dull with exhaustion and fear, his forearms trembling as he begged for help. Please, he said, his voice broken. We were wrong. We were so wrong. You must help us. President Lara Grant looked down at the alien who had laughed at humanity for decades. She was 58 years old, a former military officer who had risen through politics on a platform of human dignity and strength. Behind her sat the representatives of a united Earth, watching this moment with expressions that ranged from satisfaction to pity. "High Minister," Grant said carefully, "3 weeks ago, you called our ambassador a paranoid warmonger. You said humans were children playing at being a spacefaring species. I know what I said." The High Minister's voice cracked. "I was a fool. My entire civilization was built on foolishness. We thought peace was the natural state of the universe. We thought war was something only primitives engaged in. We were wrong." Admiral George Palmer leaned over to whisper in Grant's ear. He was 61, the head of Earth Defense Command and mentor to Admiral Bennett. "Madam President, the Vorath will reach the core worlds in 12 days. After that, they will turn toward Earth." Grant nodded slightly. She looked out at the Parliament. "We have a decision to make. The galaxy that rejected us, that mocked us, that called us dangerous animals, now asks for our help. Some would say we should let them face the consequences of their arrogance. Some would say we should fortify Earth and let the galaxy burn." She paused, letting the silence stretch. "But that is not who we are." Admiral Bennett stood at the military podium, her uniform crisp, despite the fact that she had not slept in 2 days. "I have a plan. It is dangerous, and it will cost lives. But it can work." Dr. Samuel Cruz joined her at the podium. He was the lead scientist at the Weapons Research Division, a quiet man who had spent his career developing weapons that the galaxy considered primitive. "For years, my team has been developing electromagnetic pulse technology specifically designed to disrupt machine intelligences." The galaxy laughed at our research. They said EMP weapons were outdated, useless against modern shielding. He smiled slightly. "They were wrong. Our weapons are specifically tuned to the frequencies used by the Vorath. In testing, we have achieved complete shutdown of captured Vorath components." Bennett pointed to a holographic display showing the Vorath fleet movements. The Vorath are controlled by a central processing hub located at Nexus Prime, an ancient station at the galaxy's core. Destroy that hub, and every Vorath ship in the galaxy will go dark. "How many ships do we have?" Grant asked. 400 combat-ready vessels, Palmer replied, against an estimated 5,000 Vorath at Nexus Prime. The Parliament erupted in worried murmurs. Grant raised her hand for silence. "The Council sent 10,000 ships against 2,000 Vorath and lost," a representative said. "How can 400 succeed where 10,000 failed?" Bennett's face was hard. "Because our 400 know how to fight." The vote was closer than Grant would have liked. Many representatives argued for defense, for protecting Earth and letting the rest of the galaxy fall. But in the end, humanity chose to be heroes. The resolution passed by a margin of 63 votes. Captain Cole was promoted to Commodore and given command of the strike force. He stood before his new command, 300 men and women who had volunteered for what might be a suicide mission. "You all know what we face," he told them. "The odds are bad. Many of us will not come home. But we are going anyway, because there are billions of innocent people out there who will die if we do not." He looked at the faces before him, young and old, scared and determined. "The galaxy called us Deathworlders. They meant it as an insult. But they were right. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We evolved by fighting, by struggling, by refusing to give up. That is our gift. That is what we bring to this fight." Across Earth's orbital shipyards, the fleet prepared for departure. Engineers worked around the clock, loading EMP torpedoes and reinforcing hull plating. Crews said goodbye to families, knowing they might never see them again. Ambassador Marsh stood at the viewport of the observation deck, watching the ships power up their engines. The Rathani High Minister stood beside him. "Why are you doing this?" The alien asked quietly. "After everything we said, everything we did. Why would you sacrifice your people for us? Marsh thought about the question for a long moment. Because we know what it means to be afraid. We know what it means to face extinction. Humanity almost destroyed itself 12 times before we reached the stars. We learned that survival means helping each other, even when it is hard. Even when it hurts. He looked at the alien. You called us primitives. Maybe we are. But primitives know something that civilized species forget. Sometimes the only way forward is through the fire. The fleet launched at midnight Earth time. 400 ships carrying the last hope of the galaxy, commanded by a species that had been mocked and feared in equal measure. The Deathworlders were going to war. The human fleet traveled through the ruins of civilization. Every system they passed showed signs of Vorath harvesting. Empty cities on dead worlds. Debris fields where fleets had tried to make a stand. The silence of extinction pressed against the hull of every ship. Commodore Cole stood on the bridge of the horizon, now serving as the flagship of the strike force. 3 weeks of travel had brought them deep into what had once been the heart of galactic civilization. Now it was a graveyard. Commodore Lieutenant Henry Park reported from the Fighter Coordination Station. He was 26, the youngest ace pilot in Earth fleet history. We are detecting survivors on the third planet of this system. Approximately 2,000 life signs. Cole nodded. Dispatch rescue shuttles. We will not leave anyone behind. As the fleet gathered survivors, something unexpected began to happen. Alien warships started appearing from hiding places throughout the system. Damaged vessels crewed by survivors who had refused to give up. One by one, they approached the human fleet and asked to join. Communications Officer Rita Santos handled the incoming requests. Commodore, we have 17 alien vessels requesting permission to fall in with our formation. 3 Pelori cruisers, 5 Ridani destroyers, and 9 ships from various smaller species. Tell them they are welcome, Cole replied. But they follow our orders. No debate, no discussion. We do this the human way or not at all. The alien captains agreed. They had seen what happened when they fought using their own methods. Now they were willing to learn from the Deathworlders. Over the following days, more ships joined. The fleet grew from 400 to 500, then 600. Admiral Bennett organized training exercises as they traveled, teaching alien crews the basics of human combat doctrine. Sergeant Patricia Webb led the first joint exercise. She was a Marine squad leader, 42 years old, and scarred from a dozen battles. She stood before a mixed group of human and alien soldiers, her voice carrying across the training bay. Forget everything you learned in your fancy academies, she told them. War is not about perfect formations or elegant maneuvers. War is about breaking things and killing the enemy before they kill you. It is ugly and brutal and simple. She demonstrated human close-quarters combat techniques, showing how to fight in the confined spaces of a starship. The aliens watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. You fight like animals, a Rithani soldier said. Webb smiled. Yes, we do. That is why we win. Chief Engineer Lang worked with alien engineers to modify their weapon systems, integrating human EMP technology into their vessels. The work was difficult. Alien ships were not designed for the kind of brutal combat humans expected. But Lang found solutions, often involving removing safety systems that the aliens considered essential. Your ships are built for comfort, Lang told a Pelori engineer. Ours are built for war. We will make yours more like ours. The first real test came at the Vorath Nebula, where a Vorath harvesting fleet was processing the remains of a destroyed colony. 200 Vorath ships against 600 Allied vessels. Commodore Cole had developed a battle plan based on tactics from ancient Earth naval warfare. The fleet would attack in 3 waves, with human ships leading each assault. The goal was not to destroy the enemy in one perfect strike, but to wear them down through repeated attacks, trading damage for damage, accepting losses to inflict losses. "This is insane," a Rithani captain said when Cole explained the plan. "You are asking us to deliberately take damage, to accept casualties." "Yes," Cole replied simply. "That is how you win against a superior enemy. You make them pay for every ship they destroy. You keep fighting even when you are bleeding. You refuse to stop until one side is dead." The battle began at dawn, local time. The human ships led the first wave, their EMP torpedoes tearing through Varus shields and disrupting their systems. Lieutenant Park's fighter squadron darted between the massive vessels, targeting weak points that Lieutenant Commander Price had identified through careful analysis. The Varus fought back with overwhelming firepower. Human ships took hits, their hulls breached, their crews dying. But they did not retreat. They kept advancing, kept firing, kept fighting through damage that would have destroyed any alien vessel. "The carrier Relentless is reporting critical damage," Santos announced. "They are requesting permission to withdraw." Cole watched the battle display. The Relentless was burning, but her weapons were still firing. Denied. "Tell them to maintain position and continue the attack. Commodore, they will be destroyed. They know." Cole's voice was quiet but steady. "And they will keep fighting anyway. That is what humans do." The Relentless lasted another 47 minutes, her guns blazing until the moment she broke apart. Her sacrifice allowed the second wave to punch through the Varus defensive line. By the end of the battle, 87 Allied ships had been destroyed, but 200 Varus vessels drifted dead in space, their systems fried by EMP weapons and their hulls torn by Relentless human aggression. It was the first major victory against the VOR. Admiral Bennett addressed the surviving crews that evening. Behind her, the wreckage of the battle still glowed against the nebula. "Today we proved that the Varus can be beaten. Today we showed the galaxy what Deathworlders can do. We paid a high price, and we will pay more before this is over. But we will win because we do not know how to give up." In the alien sections of the fleet, something had changed. The fear and contempt that aliens had always felt toward humans was transforming into something else: respect, admiration, and hope. The Deathworlders were leading them to salvation. Nexus Prime was ancient. The station had existed at the center of the galaxy for longer than any civilization could remember. No one knew who built it or why. For thousands of years, it had been abandoned, a relic from a forgotten age. Now it pulsed with dark energy as the Varus central hub processed data from across the galaxy. 5,000 Varus warships surrounded it, an armada that dwarfed anything the Allied fleet could muster. Admiral Bennett stood on the bridge of the command ship Oracle, studying the tactical display. 600 ships against 5,000. The mathematics were terrible, but mathematics had never stopped humans before. "All ships report ready, Admiral." Commodore Cole reported from the horizon. Bennett nodded slowly. "Begin the attack." The Allied fleet surged forward in a formation that Cole had designed specifically for this battle. Human ships formed the spearhead, their heavy armor absorbing the initial Varus fire. Behind them, alien vessels launched volley after volley of EMP torpedoes, exploiting the gaps that the human advance created. The space around Nexus Prime erupted into chaos. Energy beams and missiles crossed in every direction. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. The debris of destroyed vessels scattered across the battlefield like metal rain. Lieutenant Park led his fighter squadron directly into the Varus formation, weaving between the massive ships with impossible precision. His pilots targeted the joints between hull sections, the sensor clusters, the weapon mounts. Every small victory weakened the enemy just a little more. "We are taking heavy casualties," Price reported, her voice strained. 60 ships down, 80. The Vorath are focusing fire on our lead elements. Maintain the advance, Bennett ordered. We stop now, we die anyway. Push through. Sergeant Webb led Marine boarding teams onto disabled Vorath vessels, fighting through corridors filled with machine defenders. Human soldiers died in the darkness of alien ships, but they took the machines with them. Every Vorath vessel that fell to boarding action was one less gun firing at the fleet. On Earth, President Grant watched the battle through a quantum link that allowed real-time communication across light years. The Parliament sat in silence, watching their sons and daughters fight and die at the center of the galaxy. "We are losing," Admiral Palmer said quietly. "The casualties are too high. We should order a retreat while we still have ships left." Grant shook her head. "No, Admiral Bennett knows what she's doing. We trust her." At Nexus Prime, Bennett made a decision that would define human history. The fleet had penetrated deep into the Vorath formation, but they were being ground down. At the current rate, they would be destroyed before reaching the central hub. "All ships," Bennett broadcast on the open channel. "This is Admiral Bennett. We are going to ram through their defensive line. Every ship that can still move will advance at maximum speed directly toward the hub. We do not stop for anything." "Admiral," Cole responded. "The Horizon will lead the charge." Bennett closed her eyes for just a moment. Nathan Cole was the best officer she had ever commanded. She knew what he was offering. "Confirmed, Commodore." "Take us in." The Horizon accelerated to maximum thrust, her engines burning white-hot. Behind her, every surviving Allied ship followed. It was not a tactical maneuver. It was a charge, the kind of desperate assault that humans had practiced for thousands of years on battlefields across Earth. The Vorath tried to stop them. Ships exploded. Crews died. But the humans did not slow down. "Hull breach on decks 4 through 7, Lang reported, his hands flying over his console. "Main power failing. Switching to backup systems." "Maintain course," Cole ordered. "Price, I need targeting data for the hub shield generator." Price worked through the pain of a shrapnel wound in her shoulder. "I have it. Transmitting to all ships now." The Horizon was dying. Her hull was torn open in a dozen places. Her weapons were failing. Her crew was bleeding. But she kept moving, kept pushing through the enemy fire, getting closer and closer to the hub. "Commodore," Lang said quietly, "we are not going to survive this." Cole looked at his old friend. "I know, but we are going to finish it." The Horizon struck the hub's shield generator at full speed. The impact tore the ship apart, but it also created a gap in the defensive barrier. Through that gap, Dr. Cruz's EMP warheads streaked toward the hub's core. The explosion was visible across the entire galactic core. The central hub shattered, its processing units destroyed. Its connection to the Vorath collective severed in an instant. Across the galaxy, 5,000 Vorath ships went dark. Their systems failed. Their weapons powered down. They drifted, lifeless and harmless, through the void. The battle was over. The galaxy was saved. Escape pods from the Horizon had launched seconds before impact. Cole and most of his senior crew survived, recovered by Allied ships in the aftermath. But 217 crew members died in the final charge. Their names would be remembered forever. 1 month later, a memorial was dedicated on the remains of Nexus Prime. Representatives from every surviving species in the galaxy gathered to honor the humans who had saved them. Ambassador Marsh spoke at the ceremony, his voice carrying across the crowd of alien faces. "We did not fight for recognition. We did not fight for power or territory. We fought because it was right. Because when innocent people are dying, you help them. Even if they fear you. Even if they hate you. That is what humanity believes. That is who we are." He paused, looking out at the aliens who had once mocked his species. "You called us Deathworlders. You were right. We come from a world of death, and we learned to survive. Now we share that gift with you, not as conquerors, but as friends. The galaxy is our home now, all of ours, and we will protect it together." Across the galaxy, alien children learn new stories. Stories about the strange beings from the violent world called Earth. The beings who came from death and brought life. The beings who saved everyone. The Deathworlders had become heroes.